The roar from my parents' living room TV hit me through the phone speaker. A touchdown celebration, voices layered thick with beer and excitement. I stood in the auditorium parking lot, February wind cutting through my graduation gown, staring at the video my brother had just posted to our family group chat. There was Dad, fist pumping in front of their massive TV, Mom laughing with a wine glass raised, Mason and his friends crowded on the couch, faces painted in team colors. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m., 20 minutes ago, the exact moment I'd crossed the stage and heard my name echo into a room where 3 reserved seats sat empty in the front row. My fingers went numb around my phone, not from the cold, from the sudden crystalline understanding that they'd chosen this, not forgotten, not running late. Chosen a football game over 6 years of night classes and weekend shifts that had brought me to this single, irreplaceable moment. My diploma slipped in my shaking hands. I caught it before it hit the asphalt, and something about that reflex, still protecting something they didn't care about, made my throat close completely. My name is Annabelle Rowan, I'm 28, and I spent 6 years earning a degree my family couldn't bother to witness. This is the story of how I finally stopped showing up for people who never showed up for me. The morning had started differently. I'd woken before dawn with that particular kind of nervous energy that comes from believing today might matter to someone besides yourself. My rented gown hung on the closet door, and I'd checked my phone 17 times while getting dressed, waiting for a text saying they were on their way or asking where to park. Instead, the family chat filled with Super Bowl prep. Mom posted photos of her 7-layer dip with 3 exclamation points. Dad joked about betting on the underdog. Mason bragged about the watch party he was hosting at my parents' house, apparently. I told myself they'd show anyway, that this was how they handled nerves, with distraction and deflection. I even double-checked the reservation cards the ushers had placed on 3 seats near the front, my last name printed neatly on each one. The ceremony started at 2 p.m. By 2:15 p.m., those seats were still empty while families around me took photos and waved. By 2:30 p.m., when they called my row, I knew. But knowing and seeing proof are different animals entirely. That video in the parking lot was proof. I sat on the curb, mascara probably streaking, watching the parking lot empty around me. My phone buzzed again, another update from the living room. Mom's face filled the screen mid-laugh, no trace of concern or memory that today had been marked on the calendar for months. The crying started quiet, the kind that comes from years of swallowed disappointments finally finding an exit. I'd worked full-time through this degree, balancing 40-hour weeks with night classes and early weekend shifts, covered their emergency bills when Dad's truck needed repairs or Mason lost another job, sent money for Mom's birthday cruise last year, and they couldn't sit in a chair for 90 minutes. My phone lit up with a text from someone else, my Aunt Helena, my mom's older sister who'd always been the reasonable one in the family. Saw ceremony photos online, so proud of you, sweetheart, call me when you can. Someone had noticed. Someone who didn't want money or favors, just wanted me to know she'd been watching. I opened my banking app, then the travel app I'd downloaded months ago during a sleepless 3 a.m. shift. There was the retreat in Colorado I'd bookmarked, the one I'd told myself I'd visit someday when things calmed down. Things were never going to calm down, not with them. My thumb hovered over the booking button, one-way flight, leaving tomorrow. I pressed it before fear could stop me. The confirmation email arrived with a soft ping, and for the first time in 6 years, I felt my shoulders drop half an inch. I'd chosen myself, finally. 3 days later, Colorado looked like a postcard through the airplane window. Snow-covered peaks, pine forests, air so clear it hurt to believe it was real. The retreat center sat tucked against a hillside, smelling of cedar and something citrus. The woman at check-in smiled at me like I wasn't an obligation. "Welcome, Annabelle. We're so glad you're here." My room overlooked a frozen lake. I stood at the window watching late afternoon sun turn the ice gold and realized my jaw had unclenched for the first time in months. I told myself this was temporary. a reset before going back to Hartford and resuming my role as the family ATM. That illusion lasted until the next morning. After a massage that left me boneless and half asleep, I returned to my room and checked my phone. 15 missed texts, 13 from family. Mom, can you send $400? Dad's truck again. Dad, need help with a bill, just temporary. Mason, lost my debit card? Can you Venmo me? Not one mentioned graduation. Not one said congratulations or asked how I was feeling. The last message was from Helena. Belle, honey, check your credit report. Now, I was helping your mom organize paperwork last week and saw documents with your name that didn't look right. Please look immediately. Ice slid down my spine. I sat on the bed's edge and pulled up the credit monitoring app on my phone, hands shaking as I waited for it to load. When the screen populated, the air left my lungs in one sharp rush. Accounts I didn't recognize, store cards I'd never opened, a personal loan for $8,000 I'd never signed for, inquiries stacked like dominoes, all from the past 2 months. Every time they'd texted about an emergency. They hadn't just skipped my graduation. They'd been shopping with my identity while I handed them cash to cover the trail. My hands shook, holding the phone. Not from sadness anymore, from something hotter, sharper, recognition. This wasn't neglect or thoughtlessness. This was calculated. They'd used my future to fund their present, and they'd done it while I was working night shifts to afford the degree they couldn't watch me receive. I called Helena back immediately. She didn't sound surprised. I hoped I was wrong, she said quietly. You need a lawyer, Belle, someone who specializes in this. She gave me a name, Carmen Diaz, a financial fraud attorney in Hartford. I booked a consultation for the day I got back, and something in my chest settled into place. Not peace, but purpose. After returning to Hartford the following week, I sat in Carmen's office surrounded by printed bank statements and credit reports. She worked through the stack methodically, occasionally making notes, her expression neutral until she looked up. This is enough for criminal charges, she said. Your father and brother opened these accounts. Your mother co-signed on several. The paper trail is clear. What do I do? You protect yourself. Restraining order, credit freeze, fraud reports. Then we let law enforcement handle the rest. She paused. This won't be easy. They're going to fight back. I thought about those empty seats, the parking lot, the video of them laughing while I cried. I know. The restraining order was granted within days. I froze my credit, changed my locks, and blocked their numbers. For 72 hours, silence. Then the pounding started. 3 days after the restraining order was granted, I was unpacking groceries in my apartment when fists hammered my door. Annabelle! Dad's voice boomed through the wood. Open this door right now! I looked through the peephole. His face was red, furious. Mom stood behind him, clutching her sweater like a prop. Mason scrolled his phone, bored. They must have gotten my address from old mail at their house before I'd updated everything. Belle, Mom called, voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. We need to talk. This is important. I pulled out my phone and called my landlord. They're demanding entry. Should I call the police? Yes, please. Even through the door, Dad heard me. Police? On your own family? What's wrong with you? When officers arrived, the hallway filled with competing voices. My parents insisting this was a misunderstanding. Mason claiming they just needed a few things. The officers escorted them out with warnings about violating the restraining order. But their accusations lingered long after the noise faded. I sat on my couch afterward, hands still shaking, and understood. I wasn't safe anywhere they could find me. The next day, Carmen filed the criminal complaint, and the day after that, an email arrived from Portland. A promotion, a transfer, a chance to disappear into a city where nobody knew me as the daughter who abandoned her family. I accepted immediately, packed with Helena's help, watching movers load 6 years of exhaustion into a truck heading west. When the plane lifted off from Hartford, I watched my old life shrink beneath me and told myself the worst was over. I was wrong, but in a way, that would save me. 6 months later, Portland had become home. Quiet, respectful. My new team valued my work without expecting me to fund their lives. I told no one the full story, letting healing come slowly, like warmth returning to frozen fingers. I'd made genuine friends here, colleagues who invited me to dinner because they enjoyed my company, not because they needed something. My apartment had a view of Mount Hood, and some mornings I'd stand at the window with coffee, marveling at how peace could feel so unfamiliar and yet so right. Then a business conference invited me to speak about financial independence. I almost declined until Carmen said, "Your voice could help someone who thinks they're trapped." So I said yes. The conference was held in downtown Portland at the convention center. The ballroom was enormous. Hundreds of chairs, stage lighting that felt too bright, the low murmur of professional conversation. I stood backstage reviewing notes, smoothing my blazer, trying to steady my hands. When I stepped to the podium, polite applause rose. I adjusted the microphone. "Thank you for having me. Today I want to talk about..." A crash at the back cut through my sentence, not something dropped, something deliberate. "That's our daughter!" Dad's shout sliced through the room. My chest locked. Hundreds of heads turned. The doors burst open and they flooded in like a storm. Dad red-faced, Mom performing distress, Mason with his phone raised, recording. "She abandoned us," Dad bellowed, striding down the aisle. "Left us with nothing while she ran off to get rich." The audience murmured, confused. Cameras rose. Mom clutched her chest dramatically. "Annabelle, sweetheart, please, you're tearing this family apart." Every instinct screamed at me to shrink, apologize, make myself small enough for their comfort. But something steadier rose instead, something built in Colorado in Carmen's office and 6 months of sleeping without fear. I leaned into the microphone. "Security, these individuals are violating a court-ordered restraining order. Remove them immediately." The room stilled. Security moved in. Dad's face went purple. "A restraining order? Against your own parents?" Mason pushed forward, still recording. "Tell them how you froze our accounts, how heartless you are." I looked directly at him. "I protected myself. From all of you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Before another word could erupt, a new voice cut across the chaos. "Douglas Rowan. Mason Rowan." A detective strode through the ballroom entrance, 2 officers behind her. Carmen had been coordinating with law enforcement for weeks. When I'd mentioned the speaking engagement, she'd alerted them that my family might attempt contact, and they'd positioned officers nearby in case the restraining order was violated. The timing was both terrible and perfect. "We have warrants for identity theft and financial fraud," the detective continued. "Step forward, please." The room exploded into whispers. Dad sputtered. "This is ridiculous. We're her family." The detective's expression didn't change. Family doesn't excuse criminal behavior. As officers cuffed them both, another officer approached Mom. "Patricia Rowan, you're also being charged as an accessory for co-signing fraudulent accounts. You need to come with us as well." Mom's face went white. She lunged toward me, eyes wet, not with remorse, but panic. "Annabelle, stop this. We need you." I shook my head. "You needed my credit. You needed my silence. You never needed me." Her face crumpled, but for once it didn't hook into my guilt. It drifted past me like smoke from something already burned down. When they were finally let out, all 3 of them in handcuffs, the ballroom felt impossibly quiet. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me, not judging, but waiting. I stepped back to the microphone and exhaled. My talk today was supposed to cover budgeting techniques, but maybe what we really need to discuss is this. What happens when the greatest threat to your financial stability comes from the people you love, and what it takes to walk away? Nobody looked at their phones. Nobody shifted uncomfortably. I told them everything. The empty graduation seats, the parking lot tears, the stolen credit, the Colorado retreat where I finally chose myself. I spoke about fear and freedom, about the difference between family and people who use that word as a weapon. When I finished, silence hung for one breath. Then the room rose. Applause washed over me. Not pity, but recognition. They understood what it costs to build a life from the wreckage of people who were supposed to show up for you. Standing there on that stage in a different city, a different life, I realized something simple and devastating. I wasn't alone anymore, and I never had to be again. In the weeks following the conference, the investigation moved quickly. With warrants served and Carmen guiding every step, the truth unfolded in black and white. Accounts opened without consent, loan inquiries tied directly to Dad and Mason, a pattern stretching back 3 years. Mom's role as co-signer on multiple fraudulent accounts meant she faced charges as well, despite her protests that she didn't understand what she was signing. The trial took 4 months. Dad and Mason were each convicted of multiple counts of identity theft and fraud. Dad received 18 months in federal prison and was ordered to pay full restitution, over $32,000, including the accumulated interest and fees. Mason got 15 months and a restitution order for $24,000. Mom accepted a plea deal, 6 months in county jail, 3 years probation, and a restitution payment of $8,000 for the accounts she'd co-signed. The judge made it clear that family relationships didn't exempt anyone from accountability. The restraining order became permanent. My credit was restored line by line as the fraudulent accounts were cleared and the court orders processed. For the first time in my adult life, my future wasn't something they could reach into and destroy. Portland stopped being an escape and became home. My office filled with pieces of a life I'd chosen, photos with actual friends, a plant Helena insisted I keep alive, and finally, my diploma, framed above my desk. Not to prove anything to them, to remind myself how far I'd walked alone. Helena visited twice that first year in Portland, and we rebuilt our relationship on honesty instead of obligation. She'd divorced herself from my mother's chaos years ago, maintaining only minimal contact. I should have intervened sooner, she told me over coffee one morning, Mount Hood visible through the cafe window. I just didn't realize how bad it had gotten until I saw those documents. You warned me when it mattered, I said. That's what counts. Some nights I still heard echoes of old guilt, but they faded quickly now, drowned out by something steadier. Safety, peace, the quiet certainty that I'd saved myself. Standing backstage before my next speaking event a year later, I looked out at rows of people who'd chosen to be there. People who showed up because they wanted to, not because I paid them. I touched the edge of my notes and felt something settle. A truth I'd earned in parking lot tears and Colorado silence, and a courtroom where I finally said no. Choosing myself hadn't destroyed my life. It had given me one. If you've ever felt invisible to the people who should see you most, if you've ever funded someone else's dreams while yours collected dust, maybe my story is your permission slip. You're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to choose yourself. Share your story if you're ready. Subscribe for more real talk about the hardest choices that lead to the best lives. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. Zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.